I cannot afford the slightest mistake in believing. My eternity rests upon the Messiahship of Jesus of Nazareth. If I'm deceived here, I am lost forever. Jewish prophets lived and wrote centuries before the period in which Jesus appeared in Judea. That fact is unassailable. Further, the Jews about the time of Christ's appearance expected, with more earnestness and desire than usual, the appearance of their Messiah, who they supposed would deliver them from the subjection to Gentile nations and place Jewish power in the ascendance among the nations of the earth. They were not expecting the kingdom of Christ to be purely spiritual. They expected it to be mainly temporal. They did not understand their own preachers, but the expectation of a Messiah came directly from these Jewish prophets. These are indisputable facts. They believed him to be of exalted character, whose dominion would be triumphant, universal, and endless, whose doctrines would be pure and spiritual, and whose administration would be a blessing not only to the Jews but also to the Gentiles, and yet his life would be humble, his sufferings extreme, and that he would terminate the old dispensation and die for the sins of the people. I support these facts by Isaiah chapter 53, by Daniel chapter 9 and verses 24 through 27. Let me read to you Micah chapter 5 and verses 1 and 2. Now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. But thou, Bethlehem, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be the ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. Now that is what the Jewish Bible says. Let me read to you from Malachi chapter 3 and verses 1 through 3. Behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight in. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. But who may abide the day of his coming? Who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like a fuller's soap. And he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. And he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, and they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. Now I am reading from the Jewish Bible. Let me read to you from Zechariah chapter 9 and verses 9 and 10. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass, upon a colt, the foal of an ass. And I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off. And he shall speak peace unto the heathen, and his dominion shall be from sea even to sea, and from the river even unto the ends of the earth. Now that is what the Jewish Bible says. These things were spoken by their preachers. Now, in view of these facts, in what character would the true Messiah appear when he assumed his duties as instructor of mankind? I'll tell you this. If he had appeared and performed as the leaders of Israel wanted him to appear and perform, a temporal Messiah, it would have been direct evidence that he was an impostor. Those views were selfish, ambitious, imperfect, partial. They wanted a generalissimo like the Germans wanted a Führer. A teacher sent from God to give earth the perfect religion could not be shaped and controlled by some Pentagon operation. If an impostor wished to pass himself upon the Jews as their Messiah, he must assume the character and conform to the popular conception which he knew they expected in their Messiah. For an impostor to assume a different character from that which he knew they expected in their Messiah would have been to use means to frustrate his own plans, which would be impossible. Man cannot have a governing desire for the attainment of an end, and at the same time use means which he knows will frustrate the accomplishment of his own object. An impostor, therefore, in the state of expectancy which existed at that time in Judea, could not do otherwise than conform himself to the character which the nation was expecting their Messiah would possess. That is a fact. Now I'm going to restate in order to emphasize. 1, the Jewish preachers outlined in detail the character, life, and death of the Messiah. That is a matter of record. 2, this delineation, the politicians, the religious leaders, the leaders of society misinterpreted. That is also a matter of record. 3rd, they created their own image of what they wanted as a Messiah. 4th, the Messiah they created was in direct violation to the Messiah the God of Israel promised. And 5th, the choice then is whether to believe Jewish preachers or Jewish politicians. If Jesus of Nazareth had conformed to the views of the Jewish establishment, there would have been 3 direct testimonies that he was not from God. First, their views were partial, prejudiced, wicked. They decided to believe what they preferred to believe and not what the evidence should have led them to believe. Second, he could not have conformed to their views and sustained at the same time the character of a perfect instructor. He would have been forced to moral compromise. Third, he would not have fulfilled the predictions that the Jewish preachers predicted of him. The fact that Jesus conformed to the preachers established the truth of the prophecies. Had he not, had he gone the way of the politicians, mister, we would have no Old Testament, and the Jews would have no Bible. Long since it would have been exploded myth, or at best legend. To give life as a testimony to falsehood is impossible, either in a good or in an evil being. When Jesus of Nazareth, a Jew, conformed in every detail to the writings of the Jewish preachers and not the propaganda of Jewish politicians, he suffered death. Thus, by his death, in accordance with the prophets, the world gained the evidence that he was the true Messiah. There is no other conclusion possible. Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah of God because he pursued that course which would, from the nature of the case, result in his rejection by the nation, which conduct in an impostor would be impossible, but in the true Messiah it was the necessary course. Jesus Christ is not an impostor, mister, nor is he a mistaken zealot. He is the immaculate fulfillment of Jewish prophecies. You may reject him as a Jew, but you cannot prove that he is not a Savior. Further, it was necessary that Jesus should establish his claim as the Messiah by miraculous agency. Jesus faced a peculiar state in the history of Israel. If he, as Moses did, had come publicly before the nation at Jerusalem, and by a show of dramatic power, as Moses established his credentials before Pharaoh, entered the political arena, and forced conviction upon the minds of all the Jews that he was the true Messiah, the immediate and inevitable result would have been that they would have raised one universal revolt against the Roman power. You wouldn't have had Calvary, mister. You would have had the destruction of Jerusalem and the loss of Jewish lives. You would have had war, not salvation. Had he presented himself as Moses did to the nation, they would have hurried the Savior of sinners into the office of King of the Jews, and then bowed down to him as the temporal sovereign of the Jewish nation. Notwithstanding this risk, still it was necessary, in order to fulfill Jewish prophecies, that Jesus should manifest by exhibition of miraculous power the credentials attending the divinity of his mission. So he did what Moses never accomplished. He raised the dead, he cleansed the leper, he restored sight to the blind. This is something to contemplate. How could Jesus perform miracles and at the same time prevent revolt in the nation? It was necessary that his miracles should not be attended by that publicity and power which would lead those who had the influence of the nation in their hands and who were blind to the true design of his mission into revolt and destruction. It was likewise necessary, on the other hand, that they should be sufficiently frequent and of sufficient power to convince the candid who witnessed them that they were the seal of heaven to the mission of Jesus. Note how carefully he accomplished all of this. Every time Jesus of Nazareth performed a miracle, he had two aims in mind. First, he wished to establish a deep impression upon the minds of honest viewers that he was the true Messiah. Second, he wished at all times to avoid a rally of political leaders toward catapulting him toward temporal power. Had he permitted this, it would have brought destruction to the nation in a whirlwind of Roman wrath. I rest upon these facts. They are history, not hearsay. The character and conduct of Jesus of Nazareth accomplished what had to be accomplished to fulfill Jewish prophecies. that he performed many miracles, and yet suppressed their extensive publicity, is frequently noticed in the New Testament. He did what the true Messiah had to do. The true Messiah at the particular stage of the Jewish nation could have assumed no other character and pursued no other course of conduct than that exhibited in the life of Jesus of Nazareth. No, mister, I will not look for another. I have spent these many years examining the evidence, and I'm sure that I have not misplaced my faith that is of eternal importance to me. I must not be wrong about the Savior. A mistake about Jesus would be the most costly mistake I could ever make, and it would be for you. And now you must decide. He is one or the other. So what will you do with him? These are moments of faith. God tells us, draw nigh unto me, and I will draw nigh unto you. And I believe that. So come with me in these next 10 seconds toward the long, long altar.
There's room at the cross for you.
Virgil Clemens, who kneels with us as this altar moves through Wallace, Nebraska, found a comfort and a miracle as he knelt. Brother Ward, our daughter, was shackled by rheumatoid arthritis. We've just had her medically checked, and the report is negative. We're rejoicing in this victory, and we're happy for Brother and Sister Clemens. Mrs. Elsie Madison, who kneels with us as the altar moves through St. Albans, New York, rejoices. Our daughter and her husband have been saved. The change in their lives is a miracle of grace. Helen Shaver kneels at Long Beach, California. I asked that our children might be delivered from the cigarette habit, and they were. So join with us in faith. Our Father in heaven, we confess Jesus of Nazareth to be the only begotten Son. It is in him that we rejoice in victory. Smite the enemy who attacks the bodies of our friends with disease and crippling injury. Release our loved ones from the bondage of bad habits. Bring into the fold our friends who are losing so much every day through transgression. Bless the sacraments to us. Improve our daily testimony through the Word, through a flow of praise toward thee, through changed habits of language and finance and in relationship to others. Help this nation out of depression and bad manners and stupid selfishness. Give us bold spiritual leadership. Amen. I can feel your prayers. They're warm, and they are heard. And now for the sovereign act of grace toward an object of God's own choosing. I'm only his servant, whom he makes conscious of his leading, kneeling at this altar. Our parents worried about a sickness that has attacked your son overseas. You're almost at the point of arranging for a loan in order to buy air passage and to fly and reach your son's side. Now, you needn't do that. Jesus is healing your son at this moment. He remembers that you offered him as an infant in an act of dedication before the congregation at a church altar. That act of faith is reaching out towards your boy now, as it has so many times. To God be the glory. Now, we've been to the meeting. The Spirit asked you to join. This radio fellowship foreshadows the meeting of the air that will be at any moment. Gathered suddenly, and as definitely as we gather this past half hour, God wishes the meeting to be an incentive to you, to help you to reach out and to believe him. And he has placed in my hand and in yours for that purpose. So let's say it together. It's not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord.